The diary was small, brown leather, worn at the corners, the kind of book that looks like it has been opened and closed 1,000 times by careful hands. My grandfather's hands. I found it inside a shoebox at the back of his closet, 3 weeks after his funeral, while my mother stood in the doorway of his bedroom, telling me not to touch anything that wasn't mine. I almost listened. But something made me open it. Maybe it was the way he used to look at me, like he was the only person in the room who understood what I was actually saying. Maybe it was because I had spent 10 years being told I was dramatic, oversensitive, unstable, that I imagined things that weren't there, that I misremembered conversations, that I was, in my mother's favorite word, crazy. 10 years of being told my own mind was broken. And then I opened that diary. The first entry I read was dated 9 years ago. My grandfather's handwriting. Steady, deliberate, certain. Described exactly what I had been told never happened. I read it once, then again. Then I sat down on the floor of his closet and I didn't move for a very long time. Because every single thing I had been told I imagined was written down, in his words, in his hand, witnessed and recorded and dated. I wasn't crazy. I never had been. And someone in my family had known that the entire time. My name is Nora, and for as long as I can remember, I was the one who saw things differently. Not in a poetic way, in a way that made people uncomfortable. I noticed when my mother changed the story. I noticed when the timeline didn't match. I noticed when someone said one thing in private and something completely different in front of company. And every time I noticed, every time I said something, I was told I had misunderstood. I was 7 years old the first time my mother used the word dramatic to describe me. We were at a family dinner, and I told my aunt that my mother had said something unkind about her the week before. It was true. I had heard it clearly. But my mother smiled at me with that particular smile, the one that looked warm on the surface, and said, "Nora has such a vivid imagination. She's always been a little dramatic." Everyone laughed. I didn't understand then what was happening. I only knew that I felt ashamed, that I went quiet, that I started second-guessing the things I knew I had heard. That was the beginning. Over the years, it became a pattern. Anytime I noticed something real, something uncomfortable, something my mother didn't want noticed, I was unreliable. My memory was faulty. I was too sensitive. I needed help. By my mid-20s, I had seen 3 therapists at my mother's insistence. Each one told I was struggling with anxiety and a tendency to distort reality. I had been put on medication I didn't need. I had apologized for things that had never been my fault. I had learned to stay quiet, to doubt myself first, to assume I was wrong before anyone else had to tell me. My grandfather was the only one who never treated me that way. He didn't say much, but when I spoke, he listened, really listened. And sometimes he would nod slowly in that way he had and say, "I believe you, Nora. I always have." I thought it was just kindness. I had no idea he had been writing it all down. But I was about to find out how wrong they all were. The word for what my mother did to me, I only learned it 3 years ago, from a therapist I chose myself, not one my family selected. The word is gaslighting. It means making someone question their own reality, their own memory, their own sanity. It is a slow and patient and invisible kind of cruelty, the kind that leaves no marks, no evidence, nothing you can point to and say, "This is what was done to me." For 10 years, my mother had been doing exactly this, deliberately, consistently, and with the help of my sister Dana, who was younger, easier, and had learned very early that agreeing with my mother was the path of least resistance. When I was 23, I confronted my mother about money she had borrowed from me. $4,000 that she had promised to repay within 6 months. When I brought it up, She told me I had never given her any money, that I had imagined the entire transaction, that she was worried about me. I had no proof. I had given her cash. There was no record. When I was 26, she told extended family members that I had stopped attending family gatherings because of my mental health struggles. In reality, I had stopped attending because I was no longer willing to sit at a table where every word I said was quietly undermined. But the story she told was easier and more sympathetic. For her. When I was 28, she had a conversation with my employer. I only found out months later from a colleague who mentioned it accidentally. My mother had called to express her concern about my stability, about whether I was reliable, about whether the stress of the job was too much for someone with my history. I lost that position 8 months later. I was never told why. And through all of it, every incident, every loss, every moment of self-doubt, I kept thinking, maybe she's right. Maybe it's me. That is what 10 years of being told you are crazy does to a person. It makes you forget that you ever trusted yourself at all. But my grandfather had been watching, and he had been writing. The diary had no title, just dates, going back almost 15 years. I sat on the floor of his closet for a long time before I started reading properly. Part of me was afraid of what I would find. Part of me had been afraid of the truth for so long that I almost put it back. But I didn't. The entries were quiet and precise. My grandfather was not a dramatic man. He did not use emotional language. He wrote the way he spoke. Plainly, directly, without decoration. November 14th. Eleanor told the family today that Nora had called her crying, out of control. I spoke to Nora this evening. She was calm. She told me what had actually happened. These two accounts cannot both be true. I stared at that entry for a long time. He had noticed. He had noticed, and he had written it down, and he had dated it, and he had kept it. I kept reading. March 2nd. Eleanor mentioned again that she is concerned about Nora's mental state. Dana nodded and agreed. Neither of them asked Nora directly. I have noticed they rarely do. Page after page. Entry after entry. My grandfather had been quietly documenting for over a decade. Not with anger, not with accusations, simply with observation. The dates matched, the incidents matched, the pattern, once written down and laid out across pages, was impossible to deny. And then I reached the final entry, written 6 weeks before he passed. I am leaving this diary for Nora. She will know where to find it. She always looked for the things others didn't notice. I want her to know, in my own words, that I saw what was done to her. I believe her. I always believed her. The truth has a way of surviving, even when people try to bury it. Make sure it does. I could not breathe. My grandfather had planned this. He had left it deliberately in a place only I would think to look, at a time when I would need it most. My grandfather had given me the only thing I had ever needed. Proof that I was not who they said I was. I did not call my mother that night, or the next day. I spent 2 weeks making copies. I photographed every page. I had 3 copies stored in 3 different places. I sent one to my own attorney. And then, only then, I called a family meeting. My mother arrived expecting what she always expected from me. Confusion, upset, something she could redirect and reframe and walk away from looking reasonable. She did not expect the diary. I placed it on the table between us without saying a word. She looked at it, then at me. Where did you get that? Grandpa left it for me, I said. I think you know what's in it. She reached for it. I put my hand on it first. I have copies, I said quietly. So does my attorney. My sister Dana looked at our mother. My mother looked at the table. For the first time in my memory, she did not have a quick answer. She did not smile the warm smile. She did not reach for a reframe. I told her, calmly, without raising my voice, exactly what I knew. the documented incidents, the call to my employer, the $4,000, the years of being told my own mind was unreliable. I didn't ask her to apologize. I knew better than to want something she was incapable of giving. I simply said, I'm not asking you to admit anything. I'm telling you that I know. And I'm telling you that other people now know too. And I'm telling you that I'm done. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Dana. Dana looked at her hands. The silence in that room was the most powerful thing I had ever heard. My attorney contacted my former employer. With the documentation from the diary and records I had kept that I hadn't realized were evidence until I finally understood what I was looking at, there was enough to pursue a claim. It was settled privately. It was not nothing. I cut contact with my mother 6 months ago. Not in a dramatic moment, not with a final speech. I simply stopped answering, and I did not go back. Dana reached out once, 3 months later. She said she was sorry. I don't know yet what that means or what I will do with it, but I kept the message. That felt like enough for now. I started a new job. I found a therapist I trust, one who, in our 3rd session, said something I had waited my entire life to hear. Nora, your instincts are sound. You were not the problem. I have my grandfather's diary. I have it in a safe place, and I take it out sometimes and read a page, not because I need to be angry, but because I need to remember that someone saw me clearly, loved me honestly, and made sure I would eventually find my way back to myself. What I have now, my own clarity, my own trust in my own mind, no one can take that from me again. That is the inheritance that actually matters. There is a specific kind of cruelty in being told that your memory is broken, that your instincts are wrong, that the things you know you experienced simply did not happen. But the truth has a way of surviving. Sometimes it survives in a worn leather diary at the back of a closet. Sometimes it survives in you, in the part of you that never fully stopped believing yourself, no matter how hard someone worked to make you stop. If someone has ever made you feel like you were too much, too sensitive, too dramatic, this story was for you. Drop a heart if you believe that your instincts deserve to be trusted. Comment below. Has anyone ever made you question your own memory? Tell me. I read every single one. Subscribe, because every week we tell the stories of women who were told they were wrong about everything. And every week, we show what happened when they finally found out they were right. Because some of us were never crazy. We were just surrounded by people who needed us to believe we were.